Leviticus chapter 14. Leviticus chapter 14 continues from chapter 13. And if you remember yesterday when we talked about Leviticus chapter 13, it's about a skin disease called leprosy, something which we seldom see, but it seems to be a very prevalent skin illness of the day and needs to be treated very carefully. And yesterday we saw that a person with possible such skin disease is supposed to see Aaron or the priest. And the priest has a law to follow, to examine, to look carefully, to see if the person really have leprosy or not. So there is inspection, there is isolation, quarantine, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we saw about the clothing needs to be cleansed as well. And if the clothing is really infected, the clothing needs to be burnt away. And we ended with a person who really has contracted leprosy, to tell people, to call out to people that that there is unclean, so that people know how to avoid. And this person who has leprosy needs to stay outside the camp. And that's where we left everything. Now, in chapter 14, it comes back one full circle that this person who has leprosy one day will be healed. It will come to a point where the plague itself is not going to continue to fester. And so there needs to be a ritual for proclaiming that this person who has leprosy is now clean, because previously he was unclean. So let's look at what it says. Verse 1, then the Lord spoke to Moses, and this is to Moses, this is not to Aaron. Yesterday, when we looked at the chapter 13, it talks about Aaron as well. But now it's only Moses. It says, this shall be the Torah of the leper for the day of his cleansing. Now it's important for us to realize today we're talking about the person who has the skin disease called leprosy. And this is at the day where he is seeking to be pronounced clean. And that's purification. So he shall be brought to the priest. And notice, it's always a priest that has to do this work. Verse 3, instead of the leper coming into the camp, the priest shall go out of the camp to meet the leper. And the priest shall look at him. No? The word examine is really to look, to see carefully, and to say, well, if the leprosy is healed in the leper, meaning the leprosy is no longer festering, eating the skin, there's no white hair, the color is now pale, then the priest shall command to take for him, who is to be cleansed, 2 living and clean birds. Notice, it begins by the ritual description. This is a ritual of cleansing. 2 clean birds, right? Doves, and needs to be alive, not killed yet. Cedar wood. Now, cedar is amongst the tallest tree in the region. The tallest tree in the region. So you can see it this way. It is a very tall tree. Okay, so a person could be that height, and the tree is really high up. Then it asks for something that is scarlet, crimson, something reddish, right? Crimson. This could be some dye. Not sure what it could exactly be, but it's some form of a dye that is red in color. Could be from the worm, right? Let's see. The scientific spelling is the Coccus illicus. Now, I just give you these words so you understand. There is nothing called scarlet. I mean, the color is not the point. This is of this particular worm, and it's red in color, and it gives a red dye, right? And hyssop. Now, hyssop is actually found down on the ground. Hyssop is bush shrubs in the ground. This is high up in the tree. So we have one that's up here and one that is down here. Hyssop is used as a brush, as something that you can actually you can use the leaves and pound it and use it as herbs. You can use the branches with the leaves, and you can dab vinegar or water and dip it onto people's face and tongue. And so the hyssop is considered one of the lowest, cheapest, by the roadside. In Chinese, they say 好賤. It just grows. And cedar is right on top. So you've got one cedar and two hyssop. And you get a worm as well. And so these are very specific barang-barang, right, to bring for the ritual. Verse 5, and the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel. Earthen vessel would be a clay pot over running water. Running water is called live water, and because it's flowing, right? And as for the living bird, he shall take it, the cedar wood, the scarlet worm, and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is cleansed from the leprosy. And shall pronounce him clean. So after you've done this ritual, the priest is to declare that this leper who was outside the camp is now considered clean. And he shall let the living bird loose in the open field. He who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, wash himself with water, that he may be clean. And this is bodily clean, right? And only after that shall he come into the camp, which means that everything that is happening here is done outside the camp. That's what it means. And shall stay outside his tent 7 days. Not in his tent, but outside his tent. That's verse 8. Right? On the outside of the tent. Don't go into his tent. But on the 7th day, he shall shave off all the hair off his head, go bald, cut off his beard and his eyebrows, everywhere there is hair. Basically, on the head, on the face, on the chin, and on above the eyes. All the hair he shave off. Wash his clothes, wash his body in water, and shall be clean. Now, this is a ritual that he has to do. On the 8th day, he shall take 2 male lambs that is male, basically, without blemish. And if you every time you see the word without blemish, you know that it is an offering, that you bring a gift. And when you bring a gift to God, it must be perfect. It has no blemish. It is not blind. It is not broken a leg. It doesn't have any injury. And 1 ewe lamb. So now we have a male, and ewe lamb is a female. And this one is a young one, first year, also without blemish. And then we have flour, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with olive oil as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Let's take a look at this log of oil. This is about half liter. It's about half liter. Interestingly, when you talk about a log of oil, it may really be a container that's made from the wood chopped off the tree, with the center hollowed out, and is used for measuring liquid. So 1 log is half a liter, about half a liter. Okay. Then the priest who makes him clean was from the outside. This one is the outside of camp. Shall present the man who is to be made clean and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. Which means that every time you look at this word, before the Lord, in the face of God, it needs to be at the tabernacle of meeting, because there is the meeting place between God and man. So it's symbolic. And the priest shall take the 1 male lamb, offer it as a trespass offering with a log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering, in a holy place, which is at the tabernacle outside. For as the sin offering is the priest's. So this sin offering, interestingly, is for the priest. It is not for the leper. Why? Because the priest, when he goes and deals with the leper, may have accidentally touched something unclean. And that makes the priest unclean in a clean place called the tabernacle of the meeting. So the first thing to do is to clean the priests. And so is the trespass offering. It's for the priest. It is most holy. Verse 14, the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of the leper who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Now, you keep seeing this, right? Right ear, right hand, and right foot. In the Hebrew culture, the right side is the side of authority. It is something that will represent symbolically the authority of the leper. So the ear on top, the thumb on the right hand, and the big toe on the right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it onto the palm of his own left hand. This is the priest's left hand. Then the priest shall dip his right finger, because left hand has oil, so right hand is free. Dip it into his left hand and sprinkle. Verse 16. The word sprinkle is to spatter. To spatter, how do you call it? Is to flick with the hand where it has some oil on the right hand. It is to flick. I don't know whether you can imagine this, right? You flick some of the oil, that is, with his finger 7 times before the Lord towards the tabernacle. And the rest of the oil in his hand, the priest shall put some on the tip of the right ear, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the trespass offering. So once you have it on your ear, and then you put it on the thumb, and then you put it on the toe. And so now we have 1, 2, and 3. And they are all symbolic of his authority. And it's on top of the blood. So the first round was the blood. Now the second round is the oil. Verse 18. The rest of the oil on the priest's hand. This would be his left hand. He shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed. So this is like an anointing, right? This is like an anointing. To pour it over his head. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. And this atonement here is the word kafar, a covering for his uncleanness. Okay. Now, the priest will offer the sin offering, make atonement for him to be cleansed from his uncleanness, and then kill the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering, grain offering on the altar, and then make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. So the cleansing after the ritual is to make an offering to God as a burnt offering and a grain offering, and then the atonement is complete. Right? The atonement is complete. Now, verse 21 is this. Now, in the event if he is poor and cannot afford it, does it mean that he has no atonement? And the answer is no. God makes a provision. If he really cannot afford it, he shall take one male lamb as a trespass offering to be waived, to make an atonement for him, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain, and a log of oil, which is the same, 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons as he is able to afford. One shall be a sin offering and the other one a burnt offering. Verse 23, he shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And remember, he's back already, staying outside his tent for 7 days. On the 8th day, bring to the priest. Verse 24, the priest shall take the lamb and the log of oil, and priest shall wave as a wave offering, then kill the lamb for the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some blood and put it on the tip of his right hand, the big toe of his right foot, and pour some of the oil onto the palm of his own left hand, sprinkle with his right finger 7 times before the Lord. And the priest shall put some of the oil to the tip of the right ear, the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot on the place of the blood of the trespass offering. The rest of the oil in the hand shall be put on the head, remember, like an anointing, to make an atonement for him before the Lord. He shall offer 1 of the turtle doves, such as he can afford, and 31, such as he's able to afford, as a sin offering, as a burnt offering with a grain offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law of one who has a leprous sore, who cannot afford the usual cleansing. Now, this is about cleansing of the person who has leprosy and cannot afford. Then we can afford, it's already up there. Now that we've taken care of the examination, find out, take him out of the camp, now he's back in the camp, he's pronounced clean. What about the place where there was leprosy? Right? What about that place? So let's take a look. Verse 33, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron now, because Aaron has a role to play here. When you have come into the land of Canaan, I will give you as a possession, and I'll put the leprous plague in a house in the land of your possession. This is a very, very strange request. In verse 33 and 34, it says, when you come there, I will put leprosy in a particular house. That's it. And then he who owns a house comes and tells the priest, saying, if there is such a house, when you come into the land, you must always engage the priest. And so it seems to me that there is some plague in the house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes in to examine, to look carefully at the plague that's in the house that is not made clean, made unclean. And after the priest shall go in to examine the houses, to look carefully and examine the plague. And indeed, the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrained streaks. Now, you need to understand the house here is not made of wood. It is still made of cloth, right? It's part of the tent. And we looked at the definition yesterday in chapter 13 about leprosy on the clothing, whether it's wool or linen, right? Look at it to see whether it's greenish or reddish, whether it's deep in the wall. Then the priest shall go out of the house at the door. Go out of the house to the door of the house, shut out the house 7 days. This is quarantine. After this, come again on the 7th day and look and see if the plague has spread on the walls of the house. Then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which there is plague. Now, in this case, correction, when they come into the land, it's no longer tent, it is now made of stones. That's what it says here, aven. Stones, verse 40. And for that particular stone, if there is the plague on the wall, then they shall take out those stones, cast them into an unclean place outside the city, and he shall cause a house to be scraped inside. Scrape is a very interesting description. It means to strip off. It means to strip off. Scraping the surface, right? Scraping the surface. And the dust that they scrape off, they shall pour into an unclean place outside the city. What does this mean? If you are in a place where you are now having stones as walls, okay, and if you come and you see greenish streaks, and the priest determines that this is leprosy. And so what they do is they would scrape the leprosy, and as they scrape off, there will be dust coming down, and they will collect this and put it in an unclean place outside the city. What is an unclean place outside the city? The place where the lepers live. Verse 42, then they shall take the other stones, put them in the place of those stones, and take other mortar and plaster the house and cover it all up once again. Verse 43. Now, if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house because it's not properly cleansed after he has taken away the stones, after he has scraped the house, and after it was replastered, then the priest shall come and look. And if indeed the plague has spread, then it is an active leprosy. It is unclean. Remember yesterday, active leprosy, unclean. All leprosy is clean because it would not spread. He'll break down the house, the stone, the timber, all the plaster of the house, carry them outside the city, and whoever goes into the house while it is shut out shall be unclean until the evening for the day. He who lies in the house shall wash his clothes, and who he eats in the house shall wash his clothes. This is to signify that you have been contaminated and hence you need to wash your clothes. Very similar to COVID-19 today, isn't it? That you don't want it to spread, you need to clean yourself, quarantine yourself. No, this is standard procedure. Now in verse 48, if the priest comes in, examines, and indeed has not spread in the house after it was plastered, then the house is clean, because the plague is healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house. See, even cleaning the house has a ritual. Okay, there is a ritual, and rituals are not wrong. Rituals show that man must be intentionally doing it. 2 birds, cedar wood, tallest tree, scarlet worm, and hyssop, which is the lowest plant. Kill one of the birds in earthen vessel with running water. Take the cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet worm, and the living bird. Dip them in the blood that was stained in the running water. Sprinkle the house 7 times, and he shall cleanse the house with the bird, and the running water, and the living bird, with the cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet. Then he shall let the living bird loose outside the city in an open field. What does that mean? The loose bird will not come back. And make atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. So interestingly, you find that there is atonement for the priest, and then for the leper, and then for the house. Why in the world does a house need to be atoned? Actually, atonement is a ritual of cleansing. And so we say that, wow, it's cleansed of his sin. Well, yeah, maybe. But cleansing the house of the stones with leprosy because it's unclean, it is to restore back into the correct position before God, which is clean. And so in that sense, that is atonement. So lastly, in verse 54, this is the law for any leper's sore and scale, which we saw yesterday. For the leprosy of a garment, also yesterday. Of a house, just now. For a swelling and a scab and a bright spot, yesterday. To teach when it is unclean and when it is clean, the entire 2 chapters, chapter 13 and 14. So this is the Torah of leprosy, the Torah of the skin disease. Okay? It is straightforward, but one thing for sure, whenever you read of a story of a leper, and the leper has been made clean, the first thing he has to do is to bring 2 male lambs to the priest, 2 turtle doves, right? And a log of oil. And the priest needs to know what to do with them. No money, just bring 2 doves. And then all the barang-barang. So essentially, it is to make the leper know that he was pronounced unclean because of leprosy. Now he will be pronounced back as clean. And that's the end of chapter 14. Any questions?
Pastor, the priest is asked to be cleansed using the sin offering and the trespass offering before he did the atonement for the person he is going to clean. He did it before, isn't it?
Before. He has to clean himself first before he do it for the leper.
Then after that, after he has done it on the leper, he did not have to do it on himself again because he would have been also unclean.
Yeah. He first, you see, the whole aspect of atonement in the tabernacle is first to deal with himself. Right? To deal with himself, which is right here. In
verse 15. 17.
Is it 17?
Yes.
No.
14 to 17.
Verse 13. Verse 13, it is the sin offering of the priest. It's the priest. Okay? And if you recall, after we have covered so many chapters in Leviticus, the first thing that needs to be dealt with is holiness in the tabernacle. So it was dealing with Aaron and his sons. And so the instructions were to make sure that they themselves are holy first, so that they can deal with the sins of the people. And in this particular case, because he has to leave the tabernacle first, go out of the camp, and then to visit the leper who is to be pronounced clean, on the way there or back, he may have touched something, walked over something, crossed something that made him unclean. So he deals with himself.
So he deal with himself first.
Yes.
And then after that, he will deal
with the leper.
With the leper. After the leper, he should be considered unclean again, isn't it?
No. After he has cleansed himself, then the ritual to clean as the offering for the leper, because the leper at this time, he is already healed. You remember, the priest has to leave the tabernacle. And in his journey, after he leaves the tabernacle, outside the camp, he may have come across things which makes him unclean. So the first thing, he comes back after 7 days. On the 8th day, he does this ritual to make sure that he's cleansed first, and then for the leper. Verse 13.
The verse 17. The priest will put some of the oil onto the right ear of
first the blood and then the oil
onto the person to be
on
clean.
The leper, yes. Okay. The leper who is clean.
So with this action, the priest would have been considered unclean.
No, because the leper is already clean, no?
It's not clean until he did the ritual.
Oh, no. Okay, you need to understand. There are two things here. One is the ritual to pronounce him clean. The second one was already happened, that the leper is already clean because he has been healed.
So that the first thing is not that he is clean, but he is already healed.
Already healed, and so he is no longer unclean. But there is this particular ritual that has to go through as a pronouncement. And this will be the sin offering, trespass offering, the wave offering, the grain offering. It is to thank God, and the whole works is to remember God in the whole picture.
Okay.
So don't be mistaken. If there is no pronouncement, doesn't mean that he is not clean. It's because he's already clean that this ritual can take place. Otherwise, this ritual has no meaning.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pastor.
Bye.
Thank you, Pastor.